Welcome to the House of Law, a sanctuary for slow thoughts and soft wonder, a place where stories drift like mist, unfolding gently and finding you, just as the day begins to fade. Tonight we begin our quiet journey into the world of color, with blue, the calming depths of blue. If you're enjoying this peaceful passage through law, we invite you to like, subscribe, and share the house with others who seek rest. Your support helps us continue breathing life into these forgotten folds of knowledge. Now, let your breath soften. Let your thoughts find stillness. And let us begin. Blue, a color both endless and elusive. It curls through twilight skies, floats upon deep waters, and lingers in the dim hush of dawn. It is a shade that soothes, that calms, that whispers rather than shouts. For many, blue is the first color of comfort, a favorite among the spectrum. Familiar but mysterious. But how do we know it? And why across time and culture has it been thought of as so rare, so precious, and so hard to find? To understand blue, in its quiet majesty, we must first explore what it means to us. Cultures around the world have shaped their stories with color. Red burns with passion and fire. Green blossoms with life. But blue sings a quieter song. In ancient Egypt, blue was the color of the heavens and of creation. It adorned the gods and was used to guard both the living and the dead. To the ancient Maya, blue was a sacred pigment reserved for offerings, seen as a passage between worlds. In Persia, blue-tiled mosques reflect the divine canopy of the sky above, and in Japan, indigo, deep blue, was the color of the working class and warriors alike, blending balance with humility. From the robes of royalty to the brushstrokes of sacred art, blue has long stood for the eternal, the serene, the divine. It soothes with silence. It holds both stillness and depth, and yet, for all its beauty, blue is curiously rare in the natural world. Few animals boast a true blue hue, fewer still among flowers and plants. And for millennia, even creating blue pigments from the earth required remarkable effort. This scarcity gave blue a strange and special place in human history. In medieval Europe, ultramarine, a pigment made from crushed lapis lazuli mined in distant Afghanistan, was once more valuable than gold, and painters saved it only for the holiest of images, often the robes of the Virgin Mary. So we ask, why is blue so rare in nature? Why did it once hold such worth? And how, in its quiet, rare presence, did it become the color of dreams, depth, and peace? In soft silence, we will uncover the journey of blue. From the sky above, the oceans below, and deep into the natural world, where secrets of color slowly bloom. Let time slow with you. Let thoughts fall silent, and simply listen to the story of blue. Long before the days of artists and alchemists, long before the invention of paints and dyes, blue already held a quiet mystery. But unlike the blazing reds of fire or the earthy ochres of clay, blue was elusive. It is one of the rarest colors found in nature. And because of this, blue carried with it an unspoken sense of wonder. Look to the natural world around you. Many plants, rich with greens and yellows, thrive in vibrant foliage and floral bursts. Yet how rare it is to find a true blue petal swaying in the breeze. This is not an accident, but a puzzle of chemistry. Most plant pigments simply cannot produce the color blue. Instead, What we perceive as blue in flowers like the forget-me-not or the Himalayan poppy is often an optical shift, a clever trick of molecular structure bending the perception of color. In the mineral kingdom, the story is similar. True blue minerals do exist: lapis lazuli, turquoise, azurite. But they are neither common nor easily found. Extracted in slivers and veins from ancient stone, they were often hidden in remote and difficult-to-reach places. To early human eyes, these were treasures, glimpses of something extraordinary. A hue whispering of vast skies and distant waters, yet rarely held in hand. Among the earliest encounters with blue came through the animal kingdom. One might imagine the shimmer of a butterfly wing, the dazzling light dance not from pigment, but from structure. Microscopic scales, curved and layered just so, reflecting light at precise angles. The result, a deep and metallic blue. Similarly, in birds such as the blue jay or the hyacinth macaw, it is not the color itself that resides in feathers, but the interaction between light and feather structure, scattering white light into selective hues of blue. A delicate illusion from nature's handbook of light. Even among fish, rarer still is true blue. You may find it in tropical waters, the glint of a tangfish or a parrotfish, each one a fleeting echo of this unusual pigment. Our ancestors would have encountered these instances rarely, perhaps even only during travel or storytelling by ancient fires, and because of this, blue came to be something curious. It's important to remember, though, early humans could see blue just as clearly as any other color. Their eyes were capable, their perception true. What made blue so evocative wasn't a limitation of sight, but the scarcity of the color itself. To see blue meant to witness the unusual. To seek it was to lean into the extraordinary. So, when ancient peoples did discover blue, when they unearthed a fragment of lapis from the mountains of Afghanistan, or watched the shimmer of a sacred bird, they knew they had found something rare and precious. Color is not just what we see. It is what lives in memory, in meaning. And for blue, that meaning began with silence, surprise, and a sense of something just out of reach, somewhere beneath the vast skies of antiquity, long before the brilliance of electric hue lit our modern world. Humanity gazed upward at the heavens and wondered. There, stretched above them, was a color unlike the earthy tones of soil or stone. Blue, the color of the infinite, was intangible, yet mesmerizing. And slowly, through curiosity and time, our ancestors set out to make it their own. The earliest traces of blue in human history lead us to ancient Mesopotamia. This cradle of civilization, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates, was among the first to adorn objects with a deliberate shade of blue. They used lapis lazuli, a deep, celestial blue stone, brought from distant mines in what is now Afghanistan. To the Mesopotamians, lapis was more than decoration. It held a sacred quality, a connection to the divine. Tiny amulets, intricate seals, and the inlays of ceremonial artifacts gleamed with this rare color. In a world so rich in sands and earthen tones, blue held an otherworldly presence. But it was along the storied banks of the Nile where blue began to shift from a sacred rarity to an artistic ambition. The Egyptians, with their keen eye for beauty and the eternal, made blue part of their cultural identity. Inspired not just by lapis, but also by the expansive color of the sky and the sacred river waters, they sought a way to bring blue to life through their hands. At first, they too used fragments of lapis in jewelry, pressing it into the golden crowns of deities and pharaohs. But over time, they longed for something more, a pigment, a paint, a way to brush the color of the heavens onto stone and portray the divine not just in shape and stance, but in hue. Blue, in Egyptian belief, was a symbol of life. It was the breath of the universe, the flow of the Nile, the rhythm of creation. The goddess Hathor, bringer of joy, often wore blue. So too did Amun, the hidden one, cloaked in sky. To wear blue, to see it in art, was to be reminded of the eternal, of that which exists beyond the veil of time. This longing to manifest the spiritual in pigment led Egyptian artisans to experiment, to blend, and to fire materials in the kilns of discovery. From natron and sand, from copper and heat, secrets began to emerge. And so, in tombs painted with scenes of paradises, in amulets clutched by the departed, and in murals that illustrated life after death, blue appeared, soft in shade yet profound in promise. It wasn't merely color, it was meaning, safety, immortality, a tribute to the gods of sky and water, a bridge between the known and the unknown. In the stillness of the ancient world, this color so rare, so carefully crafted spoke in silence, whispering of the cosmos, of renewal, of dreams. In the golden warmth of the Nile Valley, where sun-baked sandstone temples kissed the horizon, ancient Egypt held secrets older than memory, and among their many mysteries lay one of the world's first synthetic pigments, a creation not of nature, but of deliberate craft. This was Egyptian blue. It began with a longing, a desire to capture the shimmering beauty of a deep celestial sky, or the sacred river rolling blue under moonlight. Natural blue stones were rare, difficult to grind or transform, so the Egyptians, ever students of divine imitation, turned to alchemy. Egyptian blue was no accident. It was an achievement born of fire and patience. To create this pigment, artisans blended silica, copper compounds, often malachite, calcium from limestone or shells, and a careful dusting of alkalis, typically soda ash or natron. These ingredients, so humble on their own, became alchemical when placed within a crucible and heated to temperatures above 850 degrees Celsius. What emerged was a substance unlike any other, warm to the touch, yet cool to the eye. A vibrant glassy blue, often softened into powder. This was calcium copper silicate, shimmering with ancient precision. The process itself was elusive, not merely because it was technical, but because it required exactitude, a fire too hot, and the pigment would darken, too cool, and the transformation would fail. The artisans became custodians of a silent science, passed down not in scrolls, but in the watching of flames and the weighing of powders. This blue. It wasn't for all. It appeared on the walls of sacred tombs, on the jewelry of priests, the robes of painted statues, and the ceilings of temples where gods drifted unseen. Its rarity lent it meaning. It was not just color, it was intention. Still, the pigment's creation was not without its limits. The scale was small. Each batch took time and patience, watched over with reverence. And as centuries passed, the knowledge ebbed slowly, like the Nile as it retreats after flood. Later civilizations would find samples of Egyptian blue, impressed upon clay and carved stone, but the method remained shrouded. A whisper in firelight. To this day, the pigment's brilliance endures. It doesn't fade easily. It remains stable in light and with time, glowing softly beneath infrared light. revealing its presence across millennia, a quiet reminder that even when the ingredients are known, there is something in the making that slips through the fingers like sand. Egyptian blue is more than a pigment. It is a testament to imagination turned tangible, to the resolve of hands and minds working in harmony under ancient skies. High in the remote mountains of northeastern Afghanistan lies a place that has quietly shaped art, culture, and devotion for over 6,000 years. The rugged peaks of the Hindu Kush cradle deep veins of an ancient gemstone, one that shimmered like a fragment of the sky itself. This is where the journey of lapis lazuli begins. Long before trains or planes or printed maps, miners here carried tools of stone and wood. They climbed precarious slopes by foot, tracing the veins of lapis through layers of calcite and pyrite, Earth's own delicate brushwork etched into stone. The mine of Sar-e-Sang, nestled in the Badakhshan province, is one of the oldest known sources of lapis lazuli still in use today. For millennia, it has yielded this enigmatic blue stone, so deep and rich in color, it seemed to contain the soul of twilight. From the raw rock, miners carefully separated the finest fragments. Bright cobalt veins would be revealed beneath the dusty exterior, glinting faintly with golden flecks of iron pyrite, often mistaken for stars. It wasn't the hardest of stones, but for all its softness, lapis was treasured not for utility, but for beauty. It was a canvas of the heavens, carved and polished into forms both symbolic and sacred. As early as 3000 BCE, artisans in Mesopotamia were fashioning lapis into amulets, beads, and cylinder seals. In ancient Egypt, it adorned the brows of pharaohs and the lids of tombs. Its color became associated with power, peace, and the divine. The stone's journey was not only one of beauty, but of myth and reverence. To some, lapis was believed to carry the very essence of the gods. It shimmered on cult statues, was ground into pigment for sacred texts, and lay across the eyes of the departed. The further it traveled, the more prized it became. Its deep hue, unlike any other natural material, led many to believe it came not from this world, but from beyond the sea, or perhaps fallen from the heavens themselves. Through quiet paths and hidden caravans, lapis passed from valley to empire, from highland quarry to paint-smeared palette. By the time it reached Europe in the Renaissance, it would become known as ultramarine, beyond the sea, a name whispered by brushstrokes across altarpieces and chapel domes, a color held sacred for its rarity, used only in the most divine of scenes. Cloaks of angels, robes of Mary, halos bathed in night sky blue. All this from a single stone, carved by ancient hands under an Afghan sun, resting now perhaps in quiet awe behind museum glass, or softly glowing atop a traveler's shrine. In the remote hills of Afghanistan, where winds whispered over stone, the deep blue heart of lapis lazuli waited in silence. But its journey was far from over. For centuries, this beautiful stone traveled across deserts and seas, until it found its way into the hands of artisans in Europe. There, lapis was not merely admired as a gemstone, it was hunted, selected, and broken apart for color. A color so cherished that it was once valued more than gold. This was the birth of ultramarine. The transformation from stone to pigment was a sacred labor. Artisans followed a method kept close like a secret whispered over generations. First, the lapis had to be chosen carefully. Only the stones with their most vivid rich blue veins were selected. The rest, often speckled with pyrite or dull with calcite, were cast aside. One could imagine a quiet workshop lit by a single candle. Inside, the stone was ground gently by hand, not too coarse, not too fine. The powder was washed and sieved again and again until only the richest blue dust remained. But the real magic came next. To isolate the ultramarine pigment, a special paste had to be made using heated wax, pine resins, and natural oils. This complex mixture cradled the blue powder like silk wrapping a jewel. Then, using lye mild alkali solution, the artisans gently coaxed the blue color from the mix. It bled out slowly, in stages. In the water, layer by layer, the deep blue pigment would settle, heavy and serene. Each extraction yielded a different depth of blue. The first and finest was called ultramarine. Its name, chosen in later centuries, means beyond the sea, a subtle nod to its distant origins. But even in its time, the color was known as something rare, something sublime. Only a few artists ever held it in their palettes. Monasteries, royal patrons, and cathedrals might offer the fortune required. And with reverent hands, painters applied it to robes of the Virgin Mary or to illuminations in sacred texts. A single ounce of ultramarine could cost more than its weight in gold. It was not only a pigment, but a declaration of wealth, devotion, and beauty. So as night curls gently around your room, imagine the steady rhythm of stone ground to powder, the quiet alchemy of blue, and the patient centuries deep that brought ultramarine to life. In the quiet corners of Renaissance chapels and vast cathedral walls, there lives a color both delicate and profound, a color once more treasured than gold itself. This was ultramarine, derived from lapis lazuli, brought slowly by caravan over far deserts and distant mountains. Ultramarine became more than a pigment. It became a symbol of the divine, a reserved expression of sacred reverence. Artists of devotion and genius turned to this blue with care and purpose. Michelangelo, the master of sealing and form, saw in ultramarine not just color, but holiness. In sacred panels and vast frescoes, ultramarine would often cloak the figures most revered. The saints, the heaven, and especially the Virgin Mary. This choice wasn't only about beauty, it was about value. Ultramarine was costly, its rarity reflecting the spiritual treasure it depicted. To robe Mary in ultramarine was to honor her purity, her celestial grace. Even the procurement of that pigment was wrapped in ritual. Before paint touched brush, before brush kissed wall, the pigment itself had to be prepared. Ground with gentle hands, carefully washed and sifted in oil. Only then did it become worthy to convey what could not be spoken aloud. The vastness of heaven, the stillness of the soul. Giotto, one of the earliest voices in the great chorus of Renaissance art, wove ultramarine across his Scrovegni chapel frescoes. Within those blue skies, the divine felt closer, more tender. His halos glimmered with gold, yes, but it was the deep, endless blue that gave them space to shine. Through walls of plaster and light, the painters told sacred stories. But beneath those frescoes was intention. Blue was rarely used for the mundane. It bound together the immortal and the ephemeral. It whispered of eternity in a human tongue. When viewers entered these sacred spaces, they didn't just see a color. They felt it. The quiet strength of ultramarine. Serene, dignified, infinite. A bridge between earth and sky, between prayer and peace. Even now, centuries later, that hush remains. Across smooth stone and faded paint, blue carries the same truth. That in choosing hue the old masters chose reverence. They gave their quiet devotion a form that could last. As long as the sky remains above us, in the quiet chambers of monasteries and the grand salons of noble courts, a singular color took its place as a symbol of devotion and wealth. This color, ultramarine, was no ordinary blue. Painstakingly extracted from the stone called lapis lazuli, its brilliance was unmatched, its cost unrelenting. And so, ultramarine became a language of social distinction. The most affluent patrons, those entrusted with coffers heavy with gold, would not only seek beauty in their commissions, but prestige. Contracts for illuminated manuscripts, sacred altarpieces, or devotional panels would sometimes include, with unwavering clarity, instructions for the artist. Use ultramarine, they wrote. Not just any blue, only ultramarine. These specifications often came at a time when much of the population had never even seen such pigment with their own eyes. To own a painting adorned with it was more than possession. It was a quiet declaration of status, of refinement, of access to the exotic. For the artists, too, the stakes were layered. Working with ultramarine demanded not just skill, but prudence. Its cost could rival that of gold, and in some cases exceed it. Yet, remarkably, when given the choice, some painters placed ultramarine above gold in their palette. They reserved it for what mattered most, perhaps a fold of the Virgin's robe, or the distant skies above a crucifixion scene. These were more than pigment choices, they were acts of reverence. In an age where symbolism spoke louder than sound, the bluest blue whispered of spiritual depth, of heavenly realms. And the wealth needed to draw them down onto panel or parchment. To commission a painting featuring ultramarine was to illuminate not only one's faith, but one's fortune. Like a jewel fixed into the narrative of paint, the presence of ultramarine transformed ordinary scenes into sacred declarations. Even as gold leaf shimmered along halos and borders, it was often the blue that drew the eye, and held it, precious, distant, and endlessly deep. And in that quiet glow, cradled by candlelight, medieval viewers saw both the divine and their own place within the order of the world. As the moon paints the landscape in silver dreams, let us wander slowly along the ancient arteries of trade, where caravans once moved beneath endless skies, and sails drifted on salt-laced winds. We follow blue, not a blue of water or air, but a rare and radiant blue ultramarine, sought by painters, prized by princes, and carried across entire continents through careful hands. Long before trains and cargo ships, there were trails etched across deserts, coiling through mountains, winding past oases and market towns. These were the thoroughfares of the Silk Road, a name given much later but born of many paths. It was along these roads that lapis lazuli, the stone cradling ultramarine's vibrant heart, began its journey. From the mines of Badakhshan, in what is now northeastern Afghanistan, chunks of rich blue stone were carried westward by merchants who valued them not only for their color, but for what that color meant. Traveling westward, the pigment followed channels already primed for luxury, the same trails that bore silk, ivory, and spice. Yet ultramarine had a mystery of its own, a reserved shimmer that moved more invisibly than gold, yet weighed heavier than silver in the minds of buyers. When ships took to the emerald blue of the Indian Ocean, Ultramarine found new rhythms of movement. Maritime trade became a vital string in its melody. Through the ports of Gujarat and Hormuz to the Red Sea and into the Mediterranean, the pigment moved quietly. Salt air might dull bronze, water might swell wood, but ultramarine held its hue, waiting in sealed containers, protected and honored. And then, like a gem settling in its perfect setting, the pigment found Venice. There, beneath the lacework of bridges and sunlit facades, Venice became more than a city. It became a gate, a prism, turning pigment into power. Venetian merchants knew the value of story and scarcity. They did not simply sell ultramarine. They presented it, imported, refined, catalogued, and then sold to workshops and monasteries with names as hushed as prayers. Venice, surrounded by salt and silk, became the heartbeat of blue, a hub from which the pigment branched into Europe's artistic heart. In the ledgers of Venetian traders, ultramarine was recorded with reverence. Sometimes valued more than saffron or fine cinnamon. Even the spices that transformed banquets could not match this paint in prestige. For to paint with ultramarine was to draw not only the virgin's robe, but to drape one's work in a symbol of divine wealth. Through calm trade winds and over patient roads of dust and stone, merchants became the messengers of blue, and with every journey, the secret of ultramarine moved farther across the empire and deeper into legend. As the world moved through the winding lanes of the medieval era into the thresholds of the Renaissance, blue, calm, infinite blue, remained a color of quiet power and striking rarity. The demand for it swelled gently, like the tide. Artists, royalty, and craftsmen all longed to work with its rare depth, yet the sources remained painfully limited. Lapis lazuli, ground to fine powder, gave a deep ultramarine, but came at a cost measured in gold and time. Known as blue gold, it had to be mined in faraway lands, most notably deep in the mountains of what is now Afghanistan. Transported over ancient trade routes, its journey alone added to its weighty price. It became clear, slowly yet certainly, that this reverence for blue could not rest forever on rare minerals alone. A new thought took root in the minds of those spurred by practicality and wonder alike. What if blue could be remade, not by chisels or paints, but by knowledge? Enter the alchemists. They were the early seekers of transformation. Beckoned by mystery and the wish to shape nature's raw materials into something more enduring, they believed that with enough experimentation, the heavens could be brought to earth. To them, changing one substance into another, lead into gold, stone into elixir, was not a daydream, but a possibility. And among their scrolls and tinctures, their glowing furnaces and quiet ambitions, blue was given a unique place. A symbol of divinity and elevation, it was not just precious, it was spiritual. And the craving for a more accessible shade of blue became in many ways a sacred pursuit. But even as the language of alchemy cloaked their work in secrecy, these early chemists began to uncover truths hidden in plain elements. Their methods were rudimentary, more art than science, but full of possibility. In Italy and across northern Europe, glassmakers and painters alike experimented in unison with scholars. Seeking solutions, they combined materials, copper, iron, cobalt, and others, in hopes of revealing a heavenly new hue. Sometimes they found hints. A deep green-leaning pigment here, a faded blue tint there, not quite the blue they dreamt of, but close enough to continue. There was failure. Often, color changed unexpectedly in the fire, Mixtures lost their shine when air touched them. What began as bright became dull or crumbly, or vanished entirely. Still they carried on. Failure in this reluctant dance became the rhythm of discovery. A step forward, then backward, then sideways. By the 15th century, the idea of inventing new blues was not only accepted, it was anticipated. The stage was being quietly set, not just by need, but by curiosity, by a growing conversation between the ancient philosophies of substance and a newer, steadier method of observation and experiment. The search for a more affordable, more stable blue was no longer just the work of monks or master painters. It was becoming the domain of thinkers, of those who wanted to look closer and ask, what is a color truly? Soon the stars of chemistry would begin to show their light. The longing for affordable blue had opened the door to them. In the early years of the 18th century, the world of color was small, limited, and often prohibitively expensive. Artists relied heavily on natural materials, stones, minerals, plants, and even insects, to bring their visions to life on canvas. But among these tools of expression, the color blue remained elusive. Lapis lazuli, for example, produced an exquisite ultramarine, renowned for its vibrant celestial hue. But it came at a steep price. Mined in distant Afghanistan, the precious stone was valued nearly as highly as gold. Painters often needed patrons to afford it, and even then the blue was reserved for only the most sacred details. The robes of the Virgin Mary, or the skies of paradise. Then, in the year 1704, something unexpected happened, something quiet, small, and serendipitous. It began in a laboratory in Berlin, where a color maker named Johann Jakob Diesbach was attempting to create a new red pigment. He was using iron sulfate, potash, and animal oil, all common materials in his craft. But something was off. Instead of the red he was expecting, his mixture turned a deep, murky blue. Confused but intrigued, he refined the process, repeating it again and again. Each time he was met not with failure but with a consistent, hauntingly rich blue, darker and cooler than ultramarine, yet entirely new. That beautiful mistake would come to be known as Prussian blue. Unlike dyes drawn from nature, this color was the product of a chemical reaction, one made possible, as it turned out, by a contaminant in the ingredients. Diesbach's potash had been tainted with animal blood, causing the iron to react in an unforeseen way, creating a compound of iron ferrocyanide. It was the first modern synthetic pigment. One might imagine a hush falling over the art world as news of this innovation slowly spread. Here was a color that didn't come from crushed gemstones or ground beetles. It was made in a flask, and remarkably, it was cheap. Finally, a blue that didn't cost a fortune, and one that offered excellent permanence and saturation. Prussian blue began appearing in paintings, dyes, and even ink. It seeped into the palettes of artists across Europe, finding a home in works of great complexity and quiet elegance. It was not just a triumph of chemistry, but an invitation to experiment, to play, and to see color in a different light. The world began to shift. From the studios of Berlin to the canvases of France and England, this new blue whispered to the artists of a changing age, and all of it, born from a simple mistake. As the 19th century unfolded, a quiet transformation began to take place. It stemmed not from royal courts or the grandeur of wealthy patrons, but from modest studios, humble homes, and winding market stalls. With the birth of synthetic blues, a color once steeped in elite status, began its slow and graceful descent into the hands of the many. For centuries, artists had revered the color blue, used it sparingly, treasured it deeply. It symbolized the divine, the unreachable, the angelic. And because its sources were rare lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, indigo from distant fields, it remained a pigment of privilege. But the arrival of synthetic ultramarine in the early 1800s changed all of that. No longer bound to the rare and costly stone, painters could now access a vivid blue at a fraction of the price. In quiet studios across Europe, color swatches blossomed with new possibility. The canvas became a more democratic space, where blue no longer whispered of wealth, but spoke instead of skies and seas, and the ordinary wonder of existence. In schools and academies, students could now paint with the same clear tones once reserved for masterworks. Church murals in small villages adopted brighter skies. Portraits of common folk wore richer garments. And as this quiet revolution took root, it began to spread. Architecture joined the symphony of change. New advances in materials preparation meant blue tints found their way onto stucco and tile, into mosaics and shopfronts. What was once royal blue became simply paintable. Doors, shutters, domes adopt a hint of cerulean, a touch of cobalt, a wash of industrial ultramarine, until blue became a motif at every level, not a signal of elite taste, but a common palette shared by neighbors, traders, seamstresses, and students. Textile makers, too, embraced this shift. Fabric dyers, once constrained by the rarity of natural indigo, found in synthetic dyes a new consistency and affordability that gave more people access to richly colored cloth. Blue dresses, blue kerchiefs, working shirts, and ribbons, all made brighter, bolder, and more available. Children wore it to school. Farmers wore it to market. Brides wore it on a hopeful morning. No longer confined to cloisters or canvases, blue had stepped fully into everyday life. And with this familiar presence came a quiet shift in meaning. What was once the color of the sacred and imperial became the color of labor, of leisure, of longing and calm. Blue grew softer, more intimate, more shared. The price of pigment fell, but the shades of the human experience it could capture grew deeper still. In this way, blue became both memory and moment woven into tapestries and time alike. Across the gentle sweep of history, few colors have stirred the world of clothing quite like blue. And within blue, one name holds steady: indigo. This deep, plant-based dye with roots in South Asia and Africa took centuries to find its way into wardrobes around the world. Once rare and treasured, indigo created hues unlike any other, rich, lasting, and beautiful. In ancient times it was reserved for royalty and prestige, but in the quiet unfolding of the modern age, blue stepped down from its throne to clothe the common world. As the centuries turned, the color found new life in everyday textile trades. Through trade routes and blended traditions, indigo-dyed cloth journeyed far, from the markets of West Africa to the cotton fields of India, and across oceans to the mills of Europe and the Americas. Soft cottons dyed in blue began appearing not just in silks for the wealthy, but in the hard-wearing garments of workers. Laborers, apprentices, and railway crews wore blue not just for its beauty, but for the way it wore. Indigo didn't simply fade, it aged, taking on new personality with time. It was a textile that lived alongside its wearer, and from this joined journey of work and wear, a new kind of clothing was born. In the late 1800s in the American West, a tailor named Jacob Davis and an entrepreneur named Levi Strauss stitched together blue denim trousers reinforced with copper rivets. Simple, practical, durable. Blue jeans were born. Originally called overalls, these sturdy blue pants were made for miners, cowboys, and field laborers. At first, no one could have imagined they would become a fashion icon. Yet, in the quiet ways of culture, blue was working its quiet magic. Its calm, cool shade began crossing lines that color alone once divided. As the decades unwound, jeans found their place in mainstream wardrobes. They came to embody a rugged independence, a quiet rebellion. By the mid-20th century, blue jeans were worn by students, artists, actors, activists, people who longed for durability, comfort, and in some subtle way, a symbol of equality. The color blue, once perched in the halls of aristocracy, had come full circle. It now cloaked the masses, offering freedom of movement and shared identity. Jeans became not just a piece of clothing, but a cultural equalizer. The soft fade of a pair of worn jeans told its own story, every step, every place, every pause in time. Blue's rise in modern clothing wasn't thunderous. It was gentle, slow, like the sea smoothing stone. Over time, it transformed how we dress, how we move, and even how we belong. And tonight, with that rich color woven through every stitch of the world's wardrobe, we find a quiet kind of peace in how far something so humble has come. Blue has long served as more than just a pigment or preference. On flags fluttering quietly in the breeze, its presence speaks to values older than our present age, yet enduring still. As dusk falls over the imagined landscapes of tradition and heritage, we continue our gentle exploration of blue upon flags and in the folds of national identity. In certain countries, blue has come to embody a united spirit, an agreement across time and culture. Think of the flag of the European Union, a simple circle of golden stars on a deep blue field. This shade of blue, cool and steady, represents unity, solidarity and harmony among nations that once stood on varied, opposing terrain, now linked together beneath a sky-colored cloth. For others, blue is the breath of freedom. In the flag of the United States, it frames a constellation of star symbols of the states, yes, but also of aspirations, liberty, perseverance, and justice. The blue canton stretches behind each point of light, forming a quiet sky of dreams kept. Similarly, in the flag of Greece, blue rivals white in balance. Its pattern reflects sea and sky, strength and integrity, a history marked by the pursuit of self-determination. Blue draws connections not just in cloth but in service and diplomacy. Military and peacekeeping uniforms around the world often utilize blue, deliberate, solemn, and respectful. The blue helmets of United Nations peacekeepers are a reassuring sight, signaling safety and neutrality in conflicted lands. They are not the blue of battle, but of guardianship under a collective trust. In the calm presence of blue, a message is whispered, not of command, but invitation. Come closer, be still, and find at least a measure of unity in shared symbols. Even in the changing tides of meaning, blue remains a constant adaptable across centuries and ideologies. From monarchies to democracies, revolution to reunion, it evolves without losing its essence. Whether painted into the stripes of francophonic pride, woven into the cloth of a Caribbean isle, or stitched into a Nordic cross, blue continues to assure us that between the realms of sky and sea, between thought and tradition, there is a place for calm, dignity, and hope. So, as you settle beneath your own quiet sky tonight, let blue's gentle tones ease you into rest. In the quiet corners of the world, where thought gathers like dew on glass, the color blue plays gently across the landscape of the mind. From the soft haze of early morning skies to the depths of the open sea, blue has long been a companion to reflection and calm. It is not merely a pigment, but a feeling, one that speaks in whispers to the nervous system, reminding it to soften, to slow, to rest. Scientific studies have revealed what many have long felt intuitively, that blue holds a calming influence on the body. When surrounded by blue shades, the heart rate gently decreases, and blood pressure finds a steadier rhythm. The mind is invited to quiet, and the breath flows more easily. This is why blue often finds its way into spas, into meditation rooms, into bedrooms designed not just for sleep, but for sanctuary. It coats the walls of therapy spaces where emotions can gently rise and settle. Its very presence seems to say, everything is all right. You are safe here. Blue invites introspection, an inward turn of thought. It asks no questions, makes no demands. Instead, it offers a mirror, not of surface, but of depth, like the stillness of a lake that reflects not only the sky, but also the quiet feeling beneath it. In this way, blue becomes more than a visual experience. It becomes emotional, even spiritual. It is often found at the heart of contemplation, favored by poets, artists, and dreamers. It represents truth, the kind one doesn't speak loudly, but senses gently. As twilight spreads its indigo veil across the evening, we feel a natural easing into rest. There is blue in the twilight, in the shadows, in the hush. It is the color that bridges day and night, waking and dreaming, effort and stillness. Let your breath fall into rhythm with this color's quiet nature. Imagine a soft, endless sky above, or a peaceful stretch of ocean reaching beyond the horizon. In both, there is space to think and space to feel, but never any pressure to do so quickly. Blue is the pause between words, the gentle silence that holds and supports all sound. It is the soothing hand on your shoulder, the comfortable hush at the end of a long day, calming, present, open. So as you settle into this moment, know that blue is here with you, not to push or to pull, but simply to soothe, to wrap you in stillness, to lead you gently inward, and to remind you that rest is not just allowed, but welcomed. As evening unfolds in quiet layers of fading light, let us return to one final reflection on blue's long and gentle journey through time. From the distant galaxies where starlight scatters across the void, to the quiet corners of our daily lives, blue has always made space for dreams to rest. It began, as many stories do, deep within the earth. In ancient stone and mineral veins, blue slumbered, ready to be discovered by those who sought its calm radiance. Ultramarine, born from lapis lazuli, was once held in higher esteem than gold, reserved for royalty, divinity, or sacred memory. Artists reached across centuries to cradle it in careful strokes of paint visions of timeless skies, angel robes, and distant landscapes. Blue became a vessel for wonder, a color that wrapped the unknown in beauty without fear. And yet, as time moved forward, the rare became familiar. Science mimicked nature, and blue found its way into cloth, into ink, into glass, glaze, and thread. Its journey carried it from the isolated treasures of nobility to the coats of humble workers and cotton garments worn at rest. From the opulence of indigo-dyed silks to the soft padding of a child's blanket, still it lingered, changing, softening, never losing its essence. Today we find blue where we most need it, in early morning shadows and twilight skies, in ocean tides and the pattern of birds that drift above rooftops at dusk. From the heavens to the home, and from grandeur to quiet comfort, blue has remained, a silent witness to love, loss, and everyday peace. It invites us to breathe more slowly, to rest our thoughts like hands upon still water. At night it wraps around us softly, asking no questions, making no demands. Once rare and reserved, blue has become our gentle companion in rest, and in this way, it fulfills its final purpose, not as a trophy of the few, but as a comfort for all, endless and enduring, like memory, like dreams.